You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Boom! This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Mr. Newbold, I hear that you've got a list, and you've checked it twice.
I have. I've made a list. I've checked it twice. I don't know who's been naughty or nice, but one thing's for certain, Making Tracks is coming to town. We're going to look back at 2024 and all the things that have happened, the wins and the losses, the hellos and the goodbyes. It's been a busier year than you might think. I mean, as we come to the end of a year, and every year comes by faster and faster and faster, it feels like the mince pies aren't even cold from last year, let alone this year. There is a reactions crew coming on Christmas Day, but we thought maybe today we'd talk about 2024 and what's been and gone. So why don't we just start at the top? I'm going to start with the first thing on the list, and the first thing on the list is Skeleton Crew. Now, we're only 4 episodes in. What are your gut impressions, your first thoughts, your first feelings when I tell you, hey, we've got a great new show, it's got 4 kids leading it, one of them was a little blue elephant, and it's called Skeleton Crew?
I suppose actually on one hand, it's nice that we're ending the year nice and strong. Definitely some goodwill in the air for Skeleton Crew from many corners of the fandom. When it was first announced, I think everybody's like, okay, this could be interesting. Let's see where it goes. I was fairly, I don't know, is ambivalent a word? I mean, it is a word, obviously.
It's definitely a word. I've heard of it. I think it might even be in the dictionary.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm just trying to think if that is the word I was thinking, but maybe a little bit ambivalent. So it wasn't necessarily like psyched and pumped for it, but at the same time, I wasn't kind of going around, oh, that's going to be crap. I was intrigued because actually, really, not a lot kind of really escaped from the set that I really heard. And
not at all.
You know, they were pretty good with that. It's kind of hit a really good tone from the very first couple of minutes, and it hasn't put a foot wrong.
Totally agree. When people were talking about it before it came out, and like you say, so little got out, you know, considering the way it was filmed and the fact that it was pretty much in the can 18 months ago. Ravi, who plays Wim, has mentioned this in a couple of interviews that, you know, we finished filming this years ago, essentially. To a kid, it's like, this is a fifth of my life ago.
But, exactly.
And now, you know, there's little whispers of maybe a season 2, and let's hope, because we're 4 episodes in as we speak. And so far, it's been fantastic. I mean, considering, like you say, led by kids, but it's not a kids' show. You know, that opening hit hard, as hard as it would have done if it was in an episode of Mando or Book of Boba. It was full on. So this is a story that is focused on children and viewed through the eyes of children, but it's not a children's show by any measure.
That is the absolute key to it. The Star Wars Galaxy, from a kid's perspective, that isn't to say that it is a kid's show. And I think as long as they really stick the landing, and I'm pretty sure I think they will, there's no reason why this couldn't be like one of the strongest Disney Plus era Star Wars shows.
Especially given that it's in the Mandoverse, which feels like its own self-contained thing. And this has got its own style, its own vibe. Watson Ford have said they're kind of already thinking the kids are grown up in real life, so we need to move it on a little bit down the road. So they're obviously thinking about the next thing, whatever the next thing is. Whether or not that has any connection to the end of this, season 1, or whether it's a completely new adventure, who knows what that little group of kids becomes, if Jod is still part of it, you know, if other characters are still in and around it. We don't know.
Do you know what? What I would love would be that actually they end this first season pretty much like the end of the first Back to the Future movie. Jod kind of flies back in and is like, Wim, we've got to go out and save the galaxy once again. And then off they go. That would be cool. Even if they then didn't actually do a season 2, but just kind of literally just went, right, okay, kids are out there, they're having fun. Other adventures and other mediums can take up the stories. I'd be well up for that.
I'd be well up for that. Another thing I'm already well up for is The Mandalorian and Grogu. We got announced this year that the film is coming in May of 2026. Filming finished this year. They're now ILM and Skywalker Sound and all of the teams are now in deep post-production on that film. It's a TV show that's going to the big screen. So given that we're now getting a Mando movie, we saw some clips from it at Celebration last year, some sort of hints and teases of what we might be getting. Another show largely made on the volume, which is great because we're not going to see a huge amount of what's going on that stagecraft sets, and hopefully not a lot's going to leak. I really want very little to leak. You've alluded to that with Skeleton Crew, the fact that it's a treat because we don't know what's coming. What's your gut right now telling you about Mando and Grogu?
Not a great deal, actually. I've not even started to poke around the Webbers first, just to kind of have a look to see what is actually out there and leaked. I'm sure there are bits and bobs, but also even what we found from speculation and the leaks, quote unquote, from the sequel trilogy is that actually a lot of it is complete and utter, like, really. In fact, it might be fan for fodder because it might be stuff that we chat about. I think it's going to be funny. It's hopefully it's going to give like the franchise a shot in the arm, but I think it sorely deserves, especially at the box office. And I'm looking forward to it. The summer of Grogu, the second coming, really, when you think about it. I'm
very curious in the way they film it because we've seen some of the, like Ahsoka, first couple of episodes of Ahsoka we saw on the IMAX down in London. Recently, I saw the first two episodes of Skeleton Crew down at the BFI. On a big screen, not an IMAX, but a big screen. And they look fantastic. But a movie is a movie. You know, the fact that television's made so cinematic now doesn't make it a cinematic experience necessarily. So I'm very curious to see how they, and I think a lot of this stuff, and it surprises me that television doesn't do it more. The way they score it, the way they spot it, the way they edit it. There's a cinematic way of editing. You know this, being an industry professional as you are, Mark. There's a cinematic way of editing. And there's a television way of editing. And I sometimes think it feels more like a television way than a cinematic way. So I'm very hopeful that Mando and Grogu has that big scope. You know, you think of seeing Boba Fett on the big screen in Empire. There's a vibe and a tone and a menace and a feel and an aesthetic just to that helmet, if nothing else. And if you can get anything near that, I think with Mando and Grogu, given all the other stuff that we know, that could be something very special. And also, and I'm waggling the air quotes, which is great for podcasting, it's bringing baggage from the television series to the big screen. How much baggage do they need to bring? Because a cinematic audience is multitudes bigger than any television audience that Mando and Grogu has ever experienced. So how are they going to parlay one against the other? This will be very interesting.
That will be interesting. But I also think for just the way that this show is constructed, like let's say if you put Ahsoka up on the big screen, you look at how much references to Rebels there was in the first season of Ahsoka. That's just not really going to work. But Mando and Grogu and the Mando series, sure, you can make a load of references, but actually, you know, it's kind of like adventure of the week, really, wasn't it, for a lot of the Mando seasons. Therefore, you probably don't need a huge amount. Oh, I hope they get Katie Sackhoff and Bo-Katan back in that. I'm sure they probably will. So there might be a little bit of exposition there, but I don't think you need to have loads, really, you know. And I think a lot of people will probably be going into the cinema knowing, you know, this was the first real big hit for Disney Plus. But you know, this was a flagship show that launched that streaming service. So I think a lot of people would at least be aware that this has come from the TV, and so therefore would probably, if they wanted to feel invested, would probably at least spend a bit of time revisiting those shows, or maybe watching it for the first time if they haven't before.
Hello, I'm Ahmed Best, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Another show that ended this year, The Bad Batch. Great run, 3 seasons, fantastic show. It felt like it was over before it began, which I would say is a good thing. Great characters, fantastic animation coming off the back of season 7 of the Clone Wars. Just so well done. What were your thoughts on that show ending? It felt to me like there was more gas in the tank, but maybe sometimes that's the best time to complete it and finish it. It was announced at Celebration Europe last year that it was ending, so we knew that it was coming to a conclusion. But the way that it was done, that little leap forward in time that was just so gentle and so well considered, it wasn't a big crazy reveal moment. It was just a character moment, really. To think that these guys got through the war and managed to get a bit of freedom and go to the island and had a life. And then we move forward in time and you see that they've had a life and they're all still together. What did you make of the finale to Bad Batch?
It could have been one of those shows that could have probably just ran and may have probably overstayed its welcome. However, I really liked where they left it. It didn't feel bittersweet per se. It felt like the right ending. And it's nice that they've handled the characters in the way that they have. I don't feel like anybody has been screwed over or not really had their time to shine. So, I'm really glad that we got that ending. And to be fair, I'm really glad we had the opportunity to visit that part of the timeline with those characters, because I think it was a fascinating view of the galaxy.
You know, that post Empire taking over era, to see that from the boots on the ground angle that Bad Batch gave us was something that we might not have expected. I know I certainly came out of it hoping that, well, actually, a few things. I hope that we do see Omega and see her story carry on forward, be it in live action or animation. That just the thought of those guys making it through and surviving, and this is kind of skipping back a little bit to Skeleton Crew. Not that they're living in suburbia by any measure on that island. It's a beautiful paradise island, but the fact that they just go and live a normal life, they've gone through everything they've been through, all the stuff we saw in Clone Wars and then saw in Bad Batch, and they've managed to eke out enough of a cubby hole in life that they can just go and live on an island. I really like that. And whilst I'd love to see them again, if we don't, I'm happy enough knowing that they'd earned that and they had a good life.
Exactly. It's a whole kind of like what happens to the soldiers after the war's done, especially those clone warriors who will have an accelerated life anyway because of their, the way that they were gestated, because you don't dwell on it. I'm sure if there was some kind of spin-off or like Amiga kind of finds her way into another animated show, you might find a last hurrah episode for maybe Hunter or Wrecker or something.
Yeah.
A la Core from Star Trek.
Core, Koloth and Kang. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone's, the Klingons who kind of come back and have that last hurrah with Jadzia. But anyhow, you could see that, and that is, again, it's probably something that they could do. If it needed to be a book, you could probably get a lot of the inner monologue and kind of get that extra emotion from that you might not necessarily get from an animated show, but you could get in a book. So let's hope that they're not completely retired, completely for now anyway.
Well, speaking of stories that are more than likely going to carry on in a book than on the big screen or the small screen or even in animation, The Acolyte. Now, that came along with high expectations. They spent a lot of money on it. It was marketed to high heaven. It was fascinating from certain points of view, that old chestnut, disappointing from other points of view. It hit hard in places. It didn't hit hard in other places. And it was cancelled. I mean, Alan Bergman has come out and said that the expenditure on it wasn't justified by the audience that sort of came back the other way. And so it no longer moves forward. From a Star Wars fan's point of view now, given that what we saw, the scope, the promise, the potential as much as anything else that was in that show, do you think there's justification to now hope as we come to the end of the year that maybe there's a life for the Acolyte somewhere? Or do you think it'll be just like you just alluded to with Bad Batch? I'd like to see this carry on in books and comics.
This had a way of trying to bridge the literary Star Wars world onto the actual optical world of like TV and film. I don't think anything really else has in such a way. However, it did feel like they were trying to take the tone of the High Republic and then move it into TV. And even the High Republic literary program hasn't been a stone cold winner. It's kind of polarized fandom on the literary world as well. As positive Star Wars fans that me and you are, it's always going to be a shame when a show or a film isn't picked up or continued. This had a lot of promise, and I kind of do wish that they could have maybe, we're just going to take a slight hiatus, maybe rethink where the show is and maybe what the show is about as such, and maybe try and retool it for season 2. And I think they probably could have done that. There's no reason why any of those environments couldn't actually be on the volume as opposed to full big sets. And if that's where the budget expenditure was, then, which as we know, sets and creating that kind of stuff kind of is, but then obviously you have those assets created, so therefore you want to try and reuse them. And it's in the subsequent reuse of them, either in a film or another series, that your budget is then justified. However, if there's not really the fandom to drive to want it there, because I don't really think I've seen many people kind of lament that it's not coming back. But I mean, then that might just be the vitriol from that side of the fandom who were more pleased more than anything. And I don't think you should ever be pleased that Star Wars is being cancelled.
No.
There's always a positive and there's always something that can be offered and can be brought back into another show. So yeah, let's just hope that for some of the characters like Osha and May and Darth Helmet or whatever the hell we want to call him, Darth Zippy, maybe there is extra life in another universe or expanded universe.
I'm hopeful, given that we now don't have any long-form animation going on at the moment. There's nothing announced. There's whispers of a series being announced soon, but nothing concrete, that if there was ever the opportunity to switch tack or change tack from live action to animation, that maybe the Acolyte could be the time period, let's put it that way, the time period that they do it within. the next season, it's a bit like Marvel do it, you know. Wanda is in Multiverse of Madness, then Wanda turns up in WandaVision, and then Wanda could turn up in something else. This character that you're following, it's not the series that you're following.
Yeah.
So there's no requirement for there to be a season 2 of The Acolyte, because if you're moving forward with Vinestra and Kamir and Osha and May, the next Star Wars story featuring them is called something else, in the same way that they don't have to do Kenobi season 2, but they can do another adventure with Obi-Wan Kenobi in it. It's the character you're following, not the show in that sense.
That in some way makes for a more organic, connected universe rather than just the case of we're going to do Kenobi season 2, when maybe that story was all told nice and neatly. And maybe when you take some of these big name stars and talent, it will be easier to say, okay, can we get Ewan McGregor in for, let's, for argument's sake, say for the young Princess Leia Chronicles, and get him in it for 2 episodes, just as almost like a cameo and a guest role. That then doesn't cost 100 odd million just to get Ewan McGregor back, and 12 months worth of negotiations and everything else that probably goes along with it. And he's then able and free to do other projects. So there's that, and like you said, then it kind of becomes this more populated universe without it kind of feeling like we're just going down the road of, well, that was popular, so we'll just flog that to death until people aren't, interested in it anymore.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
This year, conventions, loads and loads of conventions. We've both been to plenty of things, doing different stuff, because we kind of do different things when we go to these events. I've got a bit of a list of shows that I've done this year that I've really, really enjoyed. It's been a very, very busy year, but just kicking off the start of the year, Beachhead down in Bournemouth at the BIC. Second time we've been, absolutely great fun. It's a role-play convention. Highly recommended, fantastically run by Pete Bielinski and his team. It's a really lovely show, so recommend that to anyone who's ever rolled dice or has an interest in Star Wars, because there's always good Star Wars stuff there. Another show that we were both at, which was London Film and Comic Con, the Star Wars Zone this year. Plenty going on, really good guests. I think we had a really good time at that. I was fortunate enough with Matt and Brian to do Finster early in the year in Norway, to visit the hotel where they filmed Empire Strikes Back, with the crew stayed. And yes, actually, they did film a little bit there when the weather was bad. They just opened the back doors and shot into the snow. And FanX in Farnborough in October was a wonderful show. Great guests, fantastic guest list. We've got loads of good content from that show. And finally, Farthest from 26, Steve Evans, Dave Treen, knocking it out of the park once again. Fantastic show. One of the very, very best that Dave's ever done. And so, I would say it's been a very good convention year for myself and for Fantha Tracks. What about you, Mark?
Starting, at least for me anyway, a little bit too early in the calendar year, was actually quite popular and quite fun to do, was MegaCon down at London XL in January. That was like the third week of the new year. The guys from MegaCon managed to kind of squeeze that convention in. And then we did MCM London in May. It was kind of PTSD for Celebration the year before, because it was about a year since we were there with Rebel Legion and that. And that was a good one, because that was the first indicator that really the MCM Repop conventions are starting to feel like they're getting back on their feet. Joined you guys and everybody else in Star Wars Zone for London Film Comic Con, which is always a good fun event. And I suppose really just capping it all off again with another MCM Birmingham. And that was fun. We had a little social. You were there. I was there. As always, we have a wander around and a chatter about God knows what. I never remember what we talk about when we do these walks.
Oh, as soon as it's out of your mouth, it's gone, isn't it?
It is, exactly. Yeah. It's almost like you can't edit these things. But it's been busy. And there's a Facebook chat group with myself and the leaders of the other fan costume groups. There's conventions on every single week of the year next year. Some conventions, there's, maybe 2 or 3 conventions on a weekend. It's fantastic for the industry. It's fantastic for those who want to cosplay and costume and stuff. So, it just means that you've got to almost pick our battles. Whereas before, you could look forward to all these events, but now it's like you kind of got to pace yourself.
Totally do. I mean, you say about 25, we've got Celebration coming in Japan. Yeah. We've got Star Wars Fan Fun Day, which I didn't mention earlier, but that's always an amazing show. Vanessa Marshall's coming over for that for the 2025 running. So that's going to be amazing. And as you say, all the usual MCMs, London, winter and spring, as well as the summer show. So the spring show is really stacking up fast as well for LFCC at Olympia. So that's looking really great. So, we've got another busy convention year coming up. But another thing that we celebrated this year, 2 things actually, was, while speaking about Vanessa Marshall, the 10th anniversary of Star Wars Rebels. And unbelievably, the 25th anniversary of The Phantom Menace. Now, I cannot get my hat on the fact that's 25 years old. It feels like 5 minutes since it was 20 and 10 minutes since it was 10. So the fact that it's 25 just blows my mind. It feels like we're moving towards when the 50th happens in just a couple of 3 years' time now. That maybe once we get past the 50th, which is going to be the biggest pop culture celebration I think anything's ever seen ever, 50 years of Star Wars, which is just unbelievable, then we won't probably celebrate everything the way that we maybe do now. And it might just get a passing sort of tip of the hat that, hey, Empire's 50 this year or whatever is 45 this year or whatever it might be. Looking at this year and celebrating Phantom Menace the way that it did with some of the toys that came out, some of the comics, do you think they did a good celebration for both shows? I think predominantly it felt like Phantom Menace was the one that was getting the love this year.
You go back to that 10th anniversary of Phantom Menace, and still really the prequels weren't as well regarded as they are now. Now there's a lot of positivity and love for those three films. We had that fantastic theatrical poster artwork for the 25th anniversary.
From Matt Ferguson.
Exactly. And the opportunity to see the original trilogy on the big screen more often than we have done the prequel trilogy.
Yeah,
and so
definitely.
when we had the opportunity to go and see Phantom Menace on the big screen again, it was a joy. I mean, it really was. As to what happens after the 50th anniversary for like Star Wars, I completely get your point. I do wonder if they kind of maybe flog the 50th anniversaries for the original trilogy, and then it kind of maybe subsides a little bit. But at the same time, we've got so many films now, there will be an anniversary, most years of some description. But I suppose the problem is, because they've always, the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy were mainly released in May, the dates kind of trip over themselves a little bit, don't they?
They do.
The downside. Can you just imagine, if me and you are sat here recording a podcast about the 50th anniversary of The Force Awakens, which is only 40 years away when you think about it.
Well, I'll be 93, so I'm thinking it's unlikely, but I'm hopeful. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying no. If you can do this for 40 years, Mark, I'm in.
Well, to be honest, I've already licensed my voice to re-speech, so that I'm sure AI can just take it over by then. It'll be fine.
Hi, this is Ashley Eckstein, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
The music of John Williams hit Disney Plus at the start of November. Anything to do with John Williams, any celebration of his music and the man is well worth anyone's time to watch, but most importantly to listen to. I don't know about you, but listening just to the first 5 minutes, the opening montage of that show genuinely got me choked up. Not that we don't hear the music all the time, but just to hear it collide into each other, the way it was edited and the visuals that accompanied it and the sort of the behind the scenes stuff just was a joy. And the whole thing was wonderful. I watched it a couple of times and I intend fully to watch it again. I'm not going to ask you what you thought of it. How did it make you feel?
That's going to throw me. Like you said, there is something very magical about those theme tunes. And it was like when they played the Star Wars theme. They really ramped up the surround sound on it and just cranked everything to 11 just to really emphasize just how much of a massive crash it was when Star Wars came onto the screen and stuff. I was really nicely surprised as just to how much screen time they had with John Williams and just how open and warm and engaged he was with the whole process. I'd love to see how much footage I actually had with him and stuff, and then maybe some of the outtakes, because I think that'd be quite fascinating. But it's lovely because it's definitely a salute to him and the work that he's done. But by no means does that mean that it's the end. And hopefully there's still going to be more John Williams music to come, fingers crossed.
We've been very lucky. It's a great point. We've had Dial of Destiny in the last year. There is more stuff coming from him. He did the Galaxy's Edge music, and that's a few years back now. But, he did the theme for Kenobi. He did the theme for Solo: A Star Wars Story. He's still involved, and it does feel like, I don't know. I mean, I think he's done that Sinatra thing where they say, oh, this is it. This is my retirement. And then they end up doing 6 retirement tours. So much like Anthony Daniels has stopped saying, I'll never play 3PO again, because he actually didn't think he would. And it's been brought back that many times. He's like, I ain't saying it now. Just let it come to me. The last one will be the last one. But I just think it's just a smart bit of business to not say I'm going to retire. And for us as the people who enjoy this music, the people who want to buy it on vinyl and every format you can get your hands on it, just to own a little piece of it, to be able to, just enjoy that music for as long as we possibly can. And hey, the guy's well into his 90s now. He's not going to be here forever. None of us are. He's giving me inspiration to think that maybe I can be around for that Making Tracks episode to celebrate the 50th anniversary of The Force Awakens. Maybe it can be done. I thought the music of John Williams was wonderful, and long may it continue.
This is Matt Ferguson, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
We've said goodbye to a lot of people this year in the Star Wars galaxy. This year alone, we've lost James Earl Jones, who's, of course, the voice of Darth Vader. Greg Hildebrandt, the artist who did that incredible Star Wars poster way back in the very beginning of the saga. Robert Watson, producer, who worked on Star Wars, Empire Jedi, and the Indiana Jones trilogy. Asani Sharpie, who was Koth in episodes 1 and 2. Brian Turner, who designed the Palatoy Death Star. Samantha Davis, the wife of Warwick Davis, passed away this year. Michael Culver, Captain Needa. Bill Hargreaves, who built IG-88 for The Empire Strikes Back. Mark Dodson, the voice of Salacious Crumb. Maria de Aragon, who was Greedo in the reshoots for the Cantina scenes in A New Hope. And Les Conrad, who was a Gamorrean guard in Return of the Jedi, amongst other roles. And in the world of fandom here in the UK, we lost Craig Spivey. So it's been a tough year for losing people. The galaxy's never quite the same after they've gone. You've just got to, if you love this thing, you're just going to keep loving it. We'll always enjoy Michael Culver's performance as Captain Needa, like we did when he was with us. People like Bill Hargreaves, you would see at shows a lot and around and about. Samantha Davis was always with Warwick. Sam, as you know, was always the first to come over and say hi. One less thing you're going to see when you go to a show, and then to lose somebody like James Earl Jones, what an icon of cinema. That voice was worth more than its weight in gold.
You've got to enjoy the time that we can spend with these people. Make the most of the times when they are at shows and they make appearances. I mean, like me and you were down there when Robert Watts said he was going to do his last show at Star Wars Croydon. And then he went on and did at least 2 or 3 more other shows, if not maybe more, which is fantastic because that's just other opportunities for other fans to meet him. You take it for granted, don't you? You go, well, they've been around forever. Surely everybody's met Robert or Jeremy back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's always people, always new fans, who are suddenly blown away that Jeremy Bullock sat signing at a table in, I don't know, Reading or
Brent Cross, Toys R Us or whatever. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, Brent Cross. So it's always good to take the opportunity and thank these people. And it doesn't matter if they were in the reshoots for A New Hope or they played the voice of Darth Vader for 40 plus years. It's all part of a kind of a cosmic force, and it's all what makes Star Wars Star Wars.
Hi, this is Samantha Aline, the first female stormtrooper in Star Wars, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
2025. It's an anniversary year, as most years are. Force Awakens' 10th anniversary already, ridiculous. And Revenge of the Sith 20th. Loads of things coming up. There's Celebration Japan. There's all sorts of things happening. Plus, all the events that you would regularly do and that I would regularly do. We ain't getting any younger, but we're not getting any slower either. So we need to keep our energy up, isn't it? Because there's so much ahead. Are you looking forward to 2025? I know I certainly am.
Absolutely. Every year now, anyway, it's hard to be able to put your finger on it and say, oh, this is going to be this year or that year. Yes, we've got the anniversaries, but we don't actually know what's going to be announced at Celebration. And it's amazing how often Disney and Lucasfilm surprise us. I think you just strap yourself in, you prepare your pocketbook for another beating from merchandising and stuff. Yeah, just enjoy it. It doesn't feel that long ago that we were sat watching Phantom Menace and some of us were loving it on the first viewing and others were leaving the cinema Mr. Newbold not quite too sure, but that's just how it is. And I think the thing is, it's organic, it's Star Wars, so sometimes it doesn't necessarily matter if it doesn't catch you the first time. It normally catches up with you and bites you on the arse when you least expect it.
Well, in 2025 we've got so much to look forward to. We've got Andor season 2 coming in April, not long after Celebration finishes. We've got Ahsoka season 2 filming here in the UK, also in April. There's rumours and hopefully solidified rumours of the James Mangold Dawn of the Jedi Prime era film starting to shoot next year as well. And we're always hopeful one day Daisy Ridley will understand what imminent actually meant and we will get news of the Daisy Ridley film. That needs to come pretty quickly as well. They need to get their finger out on that because we're itching for it. It's now 5 years this weekend as we speak since The Rise of Skywalker came out, which means it's 5 years since a big screen movie. We're still a year and a half away from Mando and Grogu in May of 26. So we need a big Star Wars movie. We need a premiere. We need something to get McDonald's Happy Meal tie-ins and all sorts of nonsense.
Yeah, we need the fast food tie-ins.
We do.
It's been way too long.
Just as a justification for going in, because goodness knows I never go to a fast food restaurant without having a Star Wars tie-in.
Wendy's had it for Solo. That was out in the States. I don't think there is even a Wendy's in the UK. I'd heard reports or like a rumour or some kind of article saying that Wendy's is meant to be coming to the UK. I can't remember the last time I had Wendy's. So, smirk aside. But special edition, KFC.
Yes.
Those were the ones.
The drinks holders.
The drinks holders. I can remember at the time going in and asking, can I have a meal box? I'll pay for a meal, and the meal box, but just don't put the meal in the box because I want to keep it and keep it flat packed. We just looked at you as if you're nuts.
Totally.
Come Revenge of the Sith, I think they're quite accustomed to that with McDonald's and stuff. They were like, oh yeah, sure, you can have that. It's fine. Got a whole little R2D2 suitcase in the corner there, which is just full of stuff like little Jabba Hutt beanies and stuff like that.
And what else, in all honesty, would get two guys of our vintage talking about Happy Meals excitedly like we are, other than Star Wars? Isn't this the joy and magic of Star Wars? All that cholesterol. I mean, it's great, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's not going to help us see the 50th anniversary of Force Awakens, but, at least it's going to be good and taste nice when we have to consume it.
We'll be happy. Yeah. That's the main thing. Celebrate the love. And on that note, I think we've come to the end of our 2024 retrospective. Hey, let's do this again next year, Mark. Let's do this for 2025.
Absolutely. And before we go, there's two things I need to say. So one, thank you to all the listeners who have sent in listeners' questions, comments, or just dropped abusive messages into my inbox over on social media. That's always welcome. 2025 won't be a good year for Fantha Tracks if it isn't for everybody who writes and reads and does all the content for Fantha Tracks, which of course is always done just for the love of Star Wars. There's no Patreon, no one gets paid, it's all just for the love of Force. So thank you to the rest of the Fantha team, and I hope they all have a wonderful Christmas. But of course, when we are back in the new year, we will love some listeners' questions. So for the final time, 2024, Mr. Newbold, can you tell listeners and anyone who's listened to the sound of our voice how they can get in touch?
Yes, I can, and here's how you can do it.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
And that's me done for this year, Mark.
Well, it's not. Because
no, it's not, actually.
We've got one episode of Reaction Crew in a rather enthusiastic kind of way. Decided last week that we're going to do it on Christmas Day, and we're sticking to it. So we're going to be back. You can be munching on your sugar mice, whatever it is.
Jelly babies.
Jelly babies, is it?
Yeah, that's my thing, yeah.
I do like the old kind of cheap chocolate hollow Santas.
Ooh.
They always do it for me anyway. So hopefully Karen's listening and she's got me one for this Christmas. Otherwise, I'll be a very sad Fantha Tracker when we go to record Reaction Crew on Christmas Day. That will drop in the news feed. Hopefully you can listen to that around about 3:15 once you've watched the King's Speech.
Who needs the King's Speech, Mark? I know you worked on it, but I mean, really, this should be in place of the King's Speech.
There's nothing else for me to say other than thank you very much. Have a fantastic Star Wars Christmas, everybody, and a brilliant new year. And as always, may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.
Put a bow on it, or a Poe.
Stick a Poe on 2024 and move on into 2025.